Tonight on Free Minds TV, we bring you one story from the state of New Hampshire where apparently driving a hybrid counts more than being disabled when you need to park your car. We'll also be going to the state of Florida where a judge has struck down a drug law, and to the state of Nevada where an old man shot a burglar. That coming up tonight on Free Minds TV.
You have tuned into the 220th episode, or regular episode, of Free Minds TV, where we challenge you, the viewer, to think outside the box. With you, as always, is Toby.
And Nick.
We've got a lot to get into tonight of show topics to cover. We're going to be getting into that man who was shot by a burglar. It's an interesting story. I mean, yes, men shoot burglars all the time, but this is one that I find was very near and dear to my heart. You know, there's been a lot of stories about shooting burglars that, or, you know, people defending their homes that makes me happy that people are still able to protect themselves.
In some places.
In some places.
In the state of Nevada you can. Here in New Hampshire you can.
Yeah.
The story coming out of New York City or California, somebody might be in a lot of trouble
in
right
some
now.
places. New Hampshire doesn't have it as good as other states. We'll be getting into that. We'll discuss that. But first I want to start off by, well, you know, it's one of the favorite topics here on Free Minds TV, the war on drugs. If you've watched any episode of this show, even one where we don't discuss the war on drugs or any drug-related story, just by the mindset of the stories we talk about, you know, coming from a principled place on not aggressing on others unless they aggress on you. If you get that message, you get that we're against the war on drugs. It's a failed policy. Plus, you know what? You're creating criminals for imbibing in substances that should be their choices. Yes, it may be a very bad choice. So is binge drinking. Smoking pot might be just as bad of a choice, but you know what? Why do we pick and choose which drugs are socially acceptable, which ones are not? Filling prisons up with you know, your neighbor because he chooses to do a different drug than you might do, or his vice is different. Well, it just doesn't make sense to me. Plus, fiscally, it's irresponsible. It costs billions and billions of dollars every year just housing these people, prosecuting them, arresting them, not to mention everything that comes out of the economy. You know, these people, they're in jail instead of keeping their jobs. Their houses are getting foreclosed on because they're in jail. They can't pay the mortgage. Not to mention the social effects it has on family members when, you know, you put a mom or a dad behind bars because they choose to imbibe in a substance that probably wasn't a good choice. But then again, as I said, I think there's drinking or smoking or any of the prescription drugs. You know, more people die from prescription drugs than many illegal drugs.
The government doesn't seem to have a huge problem. I mean, people do, definitely. There are ways you can illegally use prescription drugs, but the government doesn't really seem to have a problem with drug use because, I mean, state governments flat out and the National Health Services flat out encourage people to, not feeling happy, take a pill. As long as your doctor prescribes it to you and a drug company made it and jacked up the price on it, then it's okay to medicate yourself to feel better.
People think that makes them safe, but no, it doesn't. Thousands and thousands of people every year die from prescription drugs that were prescribed to them, not to mention get addicted and have very harmful effects. So yes, drug use, not good for you. Whether it's prescribed by a doctor, whether you can purchase it in the state-run liquor store in many states, or whether you get it from a dealer on the street. The point is, it's a personal matter. You're not hurting anyone but yourself. And do you know what? I'm going to stay out of your business. I'll advise that you don't get hooked on drugs, especially some of the really hard ones. But am I going to want to pay to put you in a cage for it? Well, that's just stupid. So some good news this week. Normally it's very bad news, but some good news coming out this week where a Miami-Dade judge rules Florida's drug law was illegal. This coming from CBSMiami.com. A Miami-Dade Circuit Court judge ruled Wednesday that Florida's drug possession charge was illegal and agreed to dismiss the possession charges against 39 people.
What?
Yeah, don't expect a mass exodus from the jails just yet, though. The judge stayed the order for a couple of weeks to give the state time to appeal to the 3rd District Court of Appeals, where they will likely say, no, this is legal. Let's lock more people up. This will encourage drug use, said bureaucrat, Charles Nancy. Nanny. Nanny added that the judge was practicing judicial activism. It's going to have a chilling effect on crime. Nanny said, yeah, you know what? It might actually reduce some of it. Oh, but they go on to that. Almost every person shot on the street in a drive-by shooting is drug-related. So you're sending the message to citizens of Dade County, let's do more drugs. No, you stupid nanny. You are dumb. If every single drive-by that happens on the streets is because of drugs, doesn't it make sense to bring them off the black market? You'd eliminate all drive-bys.
Well, you'd actually be looking a little too deep into. You're not just looking at the correlation, then you're looking at cause, and government's not very good at identifying these problems. When they're talking about judicial activism, certainly the judge is going against, and I'm not a legal expert, but it's my understanding that usually in the Anglo-American system of justice, precedent is important. So yeah, he might be going against the precedent of all the other drug cases where they ruled that possession was constitutional when they convicted people for it, basically. But on the other hand, was it judicial activism that created the drug war in the first place? I would argue that it probably is. I mean, you could argue that maybe constitutionally, legally speaking, maybe the states and the cities have the ability to, the legal ability to prohibit people from possessing a certain substance. On the other hand, the war on drugs was largely started as a federal matter. It really took on this military war mentality out of a push by the federal government to do that. And basically the states are told that they can't decriminalize. Or if they do, the feds are going to go ahead and enforce federal law anyway. And it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, Toby, when you understand that the reason they passed an amendment to put in place alcohol prohibition was because that's not something the federal government could do, just prohibit people from possessing or making or transporting a substance. They didn't have the constitutional authority, and still don't, to do that without an amendment. So I don't think any of the federal drug laws are actually constitutional at all.
I think they
maybe if they apply to D.C. or something.
Yeah, a great argument could be made that they don't. I just want to focus still on this statement that almost every person shot on the street at drive-by, blah, 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 blah,
largely true.
is drug-related. Yeah, it's so obvious. It's right in front of us. It's like the elephant in the room. Look at what's happening in Mexico, especially on the border there, with thousands, tens of thousands of people being murdered, decapitated. All this violence that's going on there, mostly for marijuana that is consumed by millions and millions of people right here in the U.S., where it is illegal on the federal level, definitely, and on most state levels as well. Yet, there is a war going on in Mexico for it. Not only that, but of course those drugs coming in are contaminated, sprayed with pesticides, et cetera, that are very harmful to the people who consume it because it's not regulated. It's made by bad people who have no quorum with decapitating innocent people to make their billions and billions of dollars because of the war on drugs that people like Nanny here want to propagate. You made it legal. You got rid of the war on drugs. It could be cultivated in a responsible manner here in the United States where it's not being poisoned by these evil men in Mexico who just want to make millions of dollars. And you could get rid of all the violence.
Right. Well, and
what a revelation.
Right. And some of the violence does take place, here. I mean, we've had a couple of drug-related killings in this area recently, one in Keene, one in Brattleboro, that, it's not something that just happens in Mexico, and it's not something that just happens in New York City or Boston. Really, anywhere where there are a large number of people doing drugs, and obviously there's got to be somebody to supply those drugs. When you look at the number of murders that are related to the drug trade, and that would not, certainly there are some killings that might largely have been caused by somebody's angry, they're doing drugs, they kill somebody. That happens.
But it happens a lot with alcohol, too.
Right.
And
more often than not, what you're seeing with drug-related violence is you're seeing effectively people killing each other over drug deals, whether a deal went bad or somebody wants to steal money from somebody else, whatever it is, that's not uncommon. I think that's where you're seeing a lot of the violence here in the U.S.
Yeah, and it doesn't only stop with people robbing other people for their drugs or drug deal gone bad. It also, look at all the cases. Here we've had, in the past couple months, several bank robberies here in Keene, New Hampshire. We've had people being murdered over drugs. We've had home burglaries are skyrocketing all over the place, not only here in New Hampshire, but all over the country. We're going to be getting into a story about a man who defended his home. There's a very good chance that those people were after money because they had to fuel their drug habit, something that should cost pennies to do, is inflated by tens of thousands of percentage points because they have to buy it on the black market. Not a lot of people's homes are being robbed for cigarettes or a handle of vodka, but they are being robbed so people can get their money for other drugs. I just don't want to pay for it. There's so many, whatever way you look at the war on drugs, there's so many different angles to tackle how screwed up it is. Here in the getting back to this story, we're talking about apparently the judge ruled it illegal because somebody in the state of Florida could be convicted if they have drugs in their backpack or in their car, even if their friend put it there. An example of this, if a student hid his cocaine in his friend's backpack without telling him, then the owner of the backpack would still be convicted for possession of the drug. That's what the judge here is saying, well, we've just taken the drug war with a step further. So he's not even saying the drug war is illegal, he's just saying some of the really screwed up provisions of it should be illegal. And yet people are crying foul. No, we need to be able to convict. Possession, if it's in the car, the owner of the car is guilty. If it's in the house, the owner of the house is guilty. Doesn't matter who might have put it there. We've just got to be tough on this stuff because that's going to eliminate it. No, no, no. That's wrong. Look at the numbers. Since you started the war on drugs over 40 years ago, the percentage of people who use drugs has skyrocketed. The war on drugs only promotes it, just like the DARE program only promotes drugs. There's so many different ways to tackle this, Nick, and every one of them leads back to the same conclusion. The war on drugs is flawed. It's flawed.
It's a completely failed policy, and even unfortunately, there's a pretty powerful lobby that wants to keep it in place, and
many.
The one good thing,
the judicial system,
the one good position that I think
prisons.
Barack Obama ever advocated, and this was only a few years ago, was he has made the statement that the war on drugs was a miserable failure. Go ahead, look it up. This was before the campaign, before he was trying to be president and then was president. Now that he is president, we really haven't seen anything significant change. We haven't even really seen the DEA back off on raids on medical marijuana dispensaries in states where the people of the state have voted and said, we want marijuana to be legal, at least under these conditions. And he said he would end that. He really has not. It's just, I don't know, Toby. It's like you're saying. I mean, when I look through the newspaper, even here in Keene, and it's not a large community, and this goes anywhere you're watching, whether you're living, in some parts of rural America have drug problems that are actually more severe.
Much worse.
Than the city. I mean, methamphetamine's definitely
Horrible
got its
drug.
hooks in parts of the Mountain West and even out here in the East. But it's unbelievable how many crimes are committed as a result of the drug war. And sure, would there still be some relation between drug use and crime? Yeah, because it's a bad idea. It does mess with people's brain chemistry, sure. But that the amount of crime against people and their property would drop dramatically if you repealed the war on drugs.
Yeah, you can just look at the few places in the world where they have done stuff like this, like in Portugal, where they've decriminalized all amounts of small drugs. Not only has crime been reduced, but so has drug use. It's amazing that when you get rid of the penalties for drugs, people actually see those drugs being used in the street and they go, that's disgusting. It's like a billboard, a walking billboard of someone doing heroin. If he's not going to get arrested for it and he's just walking around in the street, a heroin addict, guess what? That heroin isn't so appealing to people anymore because there's a walking billboard of what will happen to you if you do heroin. We've gone on enough about this. I know we have to talk about other things. If you don't believe us, we're just a couple of young kids. What do we know about this world? Go to leap.cc, Law Enforcement Against Prohibition, where you can hear testimonials from thousands of police officers, ex-police officers, judges, prosecutors, undercover police officers, DEA agents, thousands of them from across the country who have seen the abysmal effects of the war on drugs. Their motto is, you can get over an addiction, but you can't get over a conviction, which is true. Barack Obama, getting back to him, Nick, he admitted to using drugs, not only pot, but other harder drugs. Would he be better off if he had been arrested for using those drugs? If the police had caught him, given him a criminal record? Would he have become senator? Would he have become president? Over 100,000 American adults admit to using marijuana in their lives. That's a staggering number. What if each one of them had a conviction for it, had a record every time they tried to apply for a job? What if all of them had a conviction on that? How would the economy look then? Think about it. A lot of you watching this who agree with the war on drugs probably have tried it, experimented with drugs in the past. Some of you might even use drugs like alcohol still. Would you be better off if you had been busted?
If you count, I mean, which most people don't, because their assumption is, well, a drug is any drug that's illegal.
They say drugs and alcohol.
Yeah.
Why don't they just say drugs?
I mean, if you include, the more commonly used drugs, if you include tobacco, which is actually the deadliest of all recreational drugs, you could combine all of the others, and alcohol if you count that separately for some reason. But if you count tobacco, you count alcohol, you count caffeine, and you count prescription drugs, which are mind-altering, drug use looks a lot more common. So we do have problems that we see associated with people using tobacco. That's mostly health problems. We see social problems associated with alcohol use. And frankly, you see social problems associated with prescription drug use too, even when it's done by the person who actually has the prescription. But we're told that that's okay. When people get into accidents and can't really function as well in their interactions with other people, as long as a doctor prescribed it to them, that's okay. Pharmaceutical companies need their money. They've got a very powerful lobby out there to make sure they keep getting their money. But then there's this one area where we deal with certain classes of mind-altering substances differently, and those are the illicit drugs. And where drugs are made illegal, where we're dealing with illicit drugs, that's where you see people getting killed. And granted, with alcohol use and prescription drug use and things like that, and maybe even marijuana use in places where it's been decriminalized, I doubt it, you might see, certain increases in domestic violence or in, certain other negative social effects. But if you really look at the illicit drugs and how they differ in their effect on society, well, people are less inclined to seek treatment, and they're a lot more likely to kill each other to get their hands on the stuff or to get their hands on the cash that people trade for the stuff, because there's so much money there because it's illegal and it's a black market and criminals are in charge of distributing it. So, I mean, we've got plenty of drugs out there in society, and with many of them, we realize that it's a question of treating people who actually have a drug abuse problem, not waging a war that's basically helped tear our Constitution apart, bankrupt us, and just make this overall not very nice place to live with higher crime rates.
Right, and really overall there's not very many avenues to turn to repeal some of these drug laws, because both sides, the Republicans, the Democrats, they're given millions of dollars in campaign dollars by the police unions and the industrial prison complex and all these other groups that want to keep drugs illegal.
Right, and you would, I mean, if the Constitution was actually honored at all in Washington, D.C., which it hasn't been for a very long time, and it's not just on this issue, then you could see the states create their own policies, which they're trying to do now. At least we're seeing some states want to relax marijuana laws, and in most cases they're making very minor reforms with things like medical marijuana. But at least people in some states, there are majorities there that want to do that. If we actually had a federal system like we were supposed to, where you would think basically laws about drunkenness would be made on the state level, if not on the town and city level, then we might actually be able to see different policies working here in American society and see which ones work better. But they can't do that, Toby, because not only do you have the Republicans and the Democrats pushing for this from both sides, with a few exceptions, but you've also got the fact that there's one set of rules in Washington, D.C. And the DA is in charge of enforcing them. They create their own rules without even having acts of Congress. So there's only one place to go. And as an individual citizen, you really don't have too much of a voice in Washington, D.C. Big pharmaceuticals do, when they want, to be protected and basically being the biggest, some of the most profitable drug pushers in the world. But you don't have a place to turn to when you think that drugs should be decriminalized. Yeah. Those two things could be connected.
All right, Nick. Well, moving right along, one of the major side effects of the war on drugs are home invasions. People robbing people, whether it's a burglary while you're gone at work during the day or an armed invasion while you're there at night. They have skyrocketed recently, especially with the there's still a higher, each year, there's a higher crackdown on drugs. They're amping it up. They see it's a failed policy, Anyone looking at it knows
Let's
it's
try
a
more of that
failed
failed policy.
but they keep on amping it up. So it's no surprise that, well, people who want to get their hands on drugs, which are inflated thousands of percentage points, not like cigarettes or a bottle of booze you can go pick up for a few bucks.
The state takes their cut, but not nearly. It doesn't have the same
It's
effect.
affordable. It's affordable for a homeless person to have an addiction to
They
tobacco
seem-
or to booze.
Most homeless
Not
people
very-
seem to be able to afford it without a problem.
Not so much for, say, the heroin or some of the more hard drugs. Any drug that's on the black market is marked up by thousands of percentage points. And home invasions are up. But you've got some good news from some armed citizens who are taking matters into their own hands.
This one's coming out of Reno, Nevada, where police are saying a 72-year-old resident held Robert Marin, who's armed with a knife, for an additional 4 hours after he accidentally shot Marin in the wrist. Now, apparently, he was holding the suspect captive. Two guys broke into this elderly man's home. And he pulled out a gun. One of the suspects got shot, ran away, and was later picked up by police across town. And he's been arrested and is facing charges. The other suspect, the old man tried to hold. Apparently the suspect tried to get away. And according to the account here, grabbed the old man's walking cane, trying to knock the gun out of his hand. Apparently, the old man still managed to shoot the suspect in the wrist. But he was an old man and apparently very tired. So he waited for 4 hours until he regained his strength and then forced the suspect to go across the street to his neighbor's house and call the police.
Well, I think that this is a great story. Unfortunately, though, there are many parts of the country where it just couldn't happen. In Nevada, this is somewhere where the criminals here rightly got arrested. But there's many places all over the world, and right here in the U.S., as you stated, Nick, at the beginning of the show, New York City. This could be some fishy territory. Even here in New Hampshire, we don't have the castle doctrine, which essentially states if people are busting into your home, you can shoot them. You got to protect your property. We don't have it.
You have to have. I mean, here in New Hampshire, what we have is they have to be armed, and if they're on your property and they're carrying something that could reasonably be construed as you have a reasonable reason to fear for your life, not your property, you can pretty much just shoot them.
But in this case, the suspects were trying to get away, and he still held him at gunpoint, ended up shooting him.
Yeah,
would be violating New Hampshire's law.
You know, there was appropriate to me.
The House and the Senate actually passed a law. They passed a resolution saying bring back the castle doctrine to New Hampshire. Of course, our short man Governor Lynch vetoed that. He said, "Well, we can't have that. The drug gangs would just shoot each other." Well, okay. I'm sorry. The drug gangs want to shoot each other. I don't really care.
Right.
If I want to shoot a burglar, that's okay, right?
If it's actually the drug gang shooting each other, yeah. Drug dealer breaks into another drug dealer's house, gets shot. What was the problem here? I thought the government didn't like drug dealers.
Right. Well, they're
trying to protect them and arrest them at the same time. And the interesting thing is, I believe the governor either signed into law or was pushing for the passage of a provision that would expand the death penalty here in New Hampshire to basically include homicides that were committed during home invasions or during burglaries.
Yeah.
So he's willing to kill people after the fact. Burglars who end up killing somebody in the process of a home invasion. You're willing to kill them just in cold blood. Now, I'm not saying if somebody's trying to run away, you don't have any of your property, probably shouldn't shoot them dead. On the other hand, they broke into your house. If they happened to catch a bullet doing who knows what while they were in your house, I don't really feel like this should be a problem.
Not going to shed a tear.
I don't feel like this should be a problem that the justice system has to handle.
Yeah, and you know what?
Maybe some people can write a nasty letter to the editor in your local paper and say, you're a jerk for shooting that guy in the back.
Yeah, but really
that's the appropriate penalty.
That's a deterrent for all the other would-be criminals out there. If criminals are getting shot for robbing people, breaking into their houses, well, a little less profitable to be a criminal. Personally, I say your home is your castle. Someone wants to bust into it. Well,
my understanding is that arson is covered too, and I've actually read that in
they're trying to burn down your house?
Right. But it doesn't say that there has to be a threat to your life. If you have reason to believe that they're going to commit arson. So why can they destroy my property by stealing it and I can't shoot them?
It's so
they
messed
can
up.
steal it by if they burn it, I can shoot them. But if they're just going to steal it, then I can't shoot them.
And how are you supposed to know if they're going to shoot you or not? They're a criminal who's willing to bust into your house in the middle of the night. How am I supposed to make a split-second decision? Oh, I should probably grab my kids and wife and run away. No. Shoot the bastards. They broke into your house and they could do you and your
if it's
family
unnecessary,
harm.
I wouldn't encourage you to shoot somebody if you don't have to. But
if you feel you're in danger, I don't think you should have to look for all opportunities to escape.
I mean, the biggest thing you want to do in the case of a home invasion is make sure they're actually breaking into your house.
Of course.
Make sure that, if it's some sketchy-looking guy with a neck tattoo who you don't recognize and he's got a tire iron in one hand, okay, well, maybe you can make some assumptions there. But just make sure it's not like, I don't know, your kid coming home in the middle, because this happens.
Of course.
And that's, you do want to be
the best deterrent, though,
about that.
honestly, the best deterrent, get a dog. They say show a dog is 7 times more effective than a firearm. Burglars don't want to go screw with a house with a dog. Why would you? Go to the house without a dog. Dogs wake people up. They wake the homer up to get his handgun.
Of course, the dogs are probably effective because of the guy. It's usually not the dog they're afraid of, it's the owner.
Right, they wake people up.
Yeah.
Anyways. So if you're really scared, I say get a gun. But really, why are these legislators trying to protect the criminals? That's my biggest question. It doesn't make any sense. And it differs from state to state. There are many states with castle doctrines. I would like New Hampshire to be one of them. I say your home is your castle. Burglars beware. Anyways, moving along, we have one more story I want to get into, and that's coming out of New Hampshire, but this is going on in many other parts of the United States as well. I just find it utterly ridiculous. It's coming, this story is a few weeks old, but I was searching through show prep and I was like, why didn't we talk about that? That's interesting. 3 reserved parking spaces for hybrid and low-emission cars at the new $3.3 million state liquor store. Once again, war on drugs. We have state liquor stores who sell drugs. Store in Nashua are located closer to the store's main entrance than the handicapped parking spots, causing at least one lawmaker to call the design a slap in the face to the disabled. It looks like there are 3 of these parking places where if you have a hybrid car or a LEV, low emissions vehicle, you get to park closer than people in wheelchairs. Let's see, bureaucrat Joseph Malika said the placement of the parking slots was intentional. He explained that the spots for LEV and hybrid vehicles are close to the store to assist the Leadership in Energy Environmental Design, or LEED, certification requirements, a federal designation of energy efficiency and environmental design. Well, I say, it's bollocks, it's silly, whatever. Was my little Honda LEV? Probably not. Gets good gas mileage, though. That's going to do it tonight. If you have any thoughts, opinions, want to download the show, get all the archives, freemindstv.com. Until next week, it's been Toby.
And Nick.
Have a great night.